We needs must begin with the grand finale of the Champions League group stage. There was a lot of football to be played. Lars, did it deliver?
I mean, you went big on the intro here about the the fear, dread, and anxiety. I have to see. I didn't feel a lot of fear and dread, but I suppose there were some clubs that were banging trouble for a while. But I think in terms of the nerve and the drama and I feel like the final day didn't deliver that much, and I'm sure we'll get on to a broader discussion about the format and how we feel about it. But I didn't think. I thought ahead of kickoff, I'm like, this is like the big decision day when everyone's playing at the same time and everything can happen. And then, I mean, not that much could happen, really. There were a couple of clubs that were in danger in a couple of places. But yeah, it wasn't... There was a lot of football being played and some really good goals were scored. And yeah, the football was good. But I don't think we got that sort of really nerve-wracking finale to the group stage, to be perfectly honest.
Do we have to blame Bruges for that, Andy?
Well, look, they did their best. I mean, that they outplayed Manchester City in the first half. I felt they were quite comfortable. And they went in front. So they gave us about as much jeopardy as we could have hoped for. But and I think if you look at it on paper, you think with PSG not completely secure until the final day, and with Manchester City not secure until the very much closing stages of the entire group stages, you can say, okay, there's your jeopardy. But the rest of it, if you look at it, both those clubs qualified in the end, and it was fine. There were two teams who sort of made their place in the top eight who weren't there before. And then it comes down to how much you value a place in the top eight as compared to the playoffs. Now, for what it's worth, you should, because it's two less matches, extra time off, rest, time on the training field, and in not just a football calendar, but a first year in which the Champions League seems kind of omnipresent because it's still happening during the January transfer window, leading to stuff like Gabby Agbonlahor moaning that Arsenal are trying to buy Aston Villa's players during a lead up to a big game, and it's kind of unavoidable because there's no time that you will make a bid, and it's not in the lead up to a big game of some sorts. I think that time off is more valuable than it ever has been, to both rest and to work on the training field, which teams don't really get. But apart from that, I guess Lars, it created the illusion of there being jeopardy by it all happening at once, rather than there actually being any jeopardy. Was it fair to say?
Yeah, I think it's fair that you say that it makes a big difference to make the top eight. And yeah, from Aston Villa, who've really at times seemed to wrestle with the extra responsibilities of having to play Champions League football in addition to maintaining their league form or attempting to do so. It's a big deal for Lille, I think. It's a real achievement for them to get in, and all the bigger clubs would like to rest some players. I understand the logic of that, but I can't say that I really felt the jeopardy as a neutral watching. Maybe the Villa fans were experienced this differently last night, but it wasn't. And I just think fundamentally, like in the past with the last format, the group stage was about eliminating half of the teams in the competition. Currently, we're playing a longer group stage, 2 extra match days, and it's about eliminating a third of the teams in the competition. Like, it's kind of that basic. That doesn't lead to a lot of drama. Like, a lot of these guys are saying, even if the extra knockout round is an annoyance, and then in the case of some teams, Bayern and Real Madrid are looking at this, and they're not wild about maybe meeting City in the first knockout game, even if City are having a bad time at the moment. I mean, the first knockout round, I think, is going to be very interesting. But it does lead to a very prolonged group stage, which I have enjoyed, and I've had fun with it, but it's culminated in not that many teams going out, and really not that many surprises in the group of teams going out. I guess RB Leipzig picking up 1 win in 8 feels like the biggest sort of big picture surprise here, to be honest, aside from City being in peril for so long.
Yeah, that's it. And I guess in terms of, like, if we're talking strictly before you go on, Dotun, in the final day drama, as Lars said, including Leipzig, 9 teams were eliminated before the final, like totally eliminated. And other than that, it just felt like, shuffling chairs or, changing your place in the queue, maybe.
Two of the best goals on the night came from teams who are exiting the competition here. The Kanga's shot for Crvena Zvezda against Young Boys was an incredible strike. And having to do some research on this guy, I also realized that in his youth, he played for a team in Gabon called Missile FC, which I think is a tremendous bit of... It's what you want. As a man who can certainly launch one, that is a good bit of nominative determinism. But I thought the 3-1, the consolation goal for Slovan Bratislava, was also a great bit of football from Marko Tolic. Great footwork, great near post finish. So there was some good football went on. But I felt we were short on peril, aside from maybe a sort of a 10-minute spell in the City-Bruges game where Bruges had some real chances on the counter-attack and City did their whole not really having a midfield thing, which they seem to be doing a lot this season, which Brugge really didn't seem to capitalize on. And aside from that, but there were also some interesting results, like Milan losing 2-1 to Dinamo Zagreb is a bit of an interesting one, with Sergio Conceição already, facing some stern tests at Milan, to put it very politely.
You might want to explain this playoff part, because the next stage is we ain't really done yet with the first stage, or maybe this is the intermediary stage between the first stage and the knockout stage that we're about to have.
It's purgatory.
But what is the point of this purgatory? What is the point?
Well, I guess it shows there's a real, as Lars says, there's a real worth, a real advantage to finishing in the top 8. So the best 8 teams are rewarded because they go directly to the last 16. And if we're trying to create tension, jeopardy, I think we will get that in the playoff round, those between 9 and 24. But also, I guess you would argue that there is a point to finishing between 9th and 16th, because 9th and 16th are the seeds, 17 to 24 are the non-seeds, and that affects the draw you get. So, for example, we know every team ahead of Friday's draw has got 2 possible opponents. So that's what we know so far. And Manchester City, having finished 22nd, are in with a very, very difficult task. They've got either Bayern Munich or Real Madrid, for example. Now, on current form, or on form of 2 months ago, and bear in mind this is only in 2 weeks, I don't fancy their chance of beating either of those, to be perfectly honest. So there is an actual aim to that. I think the other exciting thing about the playoffs, if we're talking about creating fan excitement, the fact that you don't have, well, I guess this is just a point of view. It might not be your point of view, but I think the removal of country protection as well suggests a lot of jeopardy.
So, and that means that every team can play any other team, whether they be within their own country or not.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and previously we avoided teams within the same country.
For the start. So you've got. Well, PSG are definitely getting someone from their own country. They're getting either Brest or Monaco, and PSG versus Monaco would be pretty good. I think the top 2 in the French league last season. You've got the chance of Milan versus Juventus, PSV versus Feyenoord, and honestly, I'm hoping for all those. I'm really hoping for all those, and there's a 50% chance, of course.
Yeah, and I mean, you touched on it briefly, which is no matter what happens, 1 out of Real Madrid, Bayern, and Manchester City are going to be out after the next stage, which is quite a thing to be able to say in sort of January, February. That's not expected. We didn't see that coming. So I do wonder if this prolonged group stage is kind of giving the big teams an extra chance almost. If they start the group stage badly, if they have a moment of crisis such as City has had, because you're playing more games than before, you have more chances of getting it right. You're playing 8 games, so eventually you will find the points to sneak into this knockout segment and avoid being in the bottom 12. But as Andy said, that if you are in a position where you have to sneak into the knockout segment, you risk coming up against some really, really good teams already in February at a very early stage of the year. So that side of the new format, I think, is creating a genuine peril for clubs who are not used to being in peril. So that's exciting.
having said that, how do we sum up? I know we're not, we're only halfway through, if you like, or a third of the way, however you want to count it, of the tournament. How can we assess it? How successful has it been, this new format?
Well, I guess in terms of creating some sort of jeopardy, it has had its successes. I mean, this is definitely like the it's a little bit like the Super League court case where Real Madrid and Barcelona come out going, yes, we've won, and UEFA come out and go, yes, we've won. I think, it's kind of all things to all people at this point, because you can selectively use bits of data from all of it and go, well, yeah, if you look at it, PSG and City really had to battle to continue to be on the group stage, and this would have been the first time that Guardiola was eliminated from a Champions League group stage. It would have been the first time that PSG in the QSI in the Qatar era have been eliminated from a Champions League group stage. And of course, is the fact that because everyone plays each other once, there is a sense of excitement around that. There's no revenge game. There's no chance to get the measure of an opponent and take them on again. But because it's such a...
Do you prefer that?
Well, I think it gives the illusion, at least, of being more like knockouty, doesn't it?
Cup final.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, we've only got this one group stage to judge on, and it's only just finished yesterday at the time of recording. So to talk about long-term effects or what this has done to the European game or whatever, we can't talk about that yet. And we probably can't talk about that until we're a couple of years down the line and we've got the unintended consequences as well as the consequences as well. But I do think that so much of the jeopardy, in inverted commas, that there has been so far has been because teams have been getting used to the format. So, for example, I hypothesised at the start that to qualify, in other words, finish top 24, you'd need 10 points and you'd need 15 or 16 to finish top 8. Now, that was, I guess, an educated guess. You needed a little bit more, but a ballpark, it was more or less there, I think. But I did feel at various points that there were teams, because they didn't know what the magic number was, they sort of struggled to find a way to settle into some sort of rhythm or strategy. And we saw that affecting even some of the biggest clubs. Now, I've already talked about PSG and Manchester City, but if you bear in mind, like Bayern lost 3 of their games as well. That would never happen in a normal group stage. And if you cut it down like proportionally, they'd never lose 2 in a normal group stage. And you had Joshua Kimmich after they lost in Feyenoord going, well, we can't consider ourselves an elite team anymore because you don't lose games like this. So it's obviously got in the heads of the players a little bit. Does that balance out over the next year or two? Maybe.
Lush?
And I think I've really wrestled with this. I've thought about this since yesterday because I figured we were going to talk about this. I'm in 2 minds about how I experienced the new format. Because you listen to someone like Jonathan Wilson, who's a very smart guy, argue vociferously that this new format is stupid and bad. That in a time where everyone's worried about the players playing too much football, the calendar being too squeezed, UEFA have changed the format and introduced extra match days to eliminate fewer teams from the competition. That doesn't seem logical. Yeah, we're playing more games to eliminate fewer teams at a time where everyone thinks there's too much games being played. I fully understand the logic of that, but I have found myself on a less logical and more sort of emotional vibes-based level enjoying the tournament this season. Like, there have been very few match days that have been complete duds. The way they've done it with the draws and the seeding, the way they've worked that out, I can't remember too many Champions League nights where there's just been nothing interesting on. I feel like it's been fun, which is kind of important. And I like the fact that no one's playing each other twice. Like, it's all a bit of a mystery box. From a professional work-related standpoint, it's annoying because there's no way I'm ever going to learn who all 36 teams have drawn. Like, that's not going to be plausible. So it's before you knew what the groups were and you could think about and you could do a lot of content on group previews and stuff. Now it's like everyone's drawn a bunch of teams and it's like, oh yeah, I guess this is happening. This is very hard to keep track of. But that has also added a variable, like some teams have had just like a really, some teams will get a harder draw than others, which is kind of interesting to me. Like Real Madrid looked like they were in a bit of bother halfway through because they lost a few games. But their opponents, like they've played Stuttgart, Lille, Dortmund, Milan, Liverpool, Atalanta, Salzburg, and Brest. That's a really tough draw. And I don't want to pick on them because they've done really well to qualify, and I'm really happy for them. But if you compare it to Celtic, who played Slovan Bratislava, Dortmund, Atalanta, two similar ones, but then a bad RB Leipzig, Club Brugge, Dinamo Zagreb, Young Boys, and Aston Villa. Like, if you had to choose between those two, you'd be pretty happy to have the Celtic one. So it adds something to the mix with who you're playing. And I've just had I've really enjoyed the tournament. I would have enjoyed a little bit more peril last night, but then I feel like we need to give it a few more seasons to see how that works out. Maybe there will be more teams in trouble next year when we're doing this.